Hello and welcome to this Ottobock podcast. My name is Chloe and today's podcast is in recognition of World Stroke Day, which is coming up on October the 29th. Today I'm joined by Ottobock Ambassador Megan Giglia MBE.
I'm Megan Giglia MBE. I'm actually a paracyclist for the Great British Cycling Team. I'm actually due to exit the programme and try new ventures coming up shortly. But yeah, I'm a paracyclist. Effectively, I had a stroke 8 years ago and that changed my entire life. But since the stroke, I've gone on to achieve the first gold medal of the Rio 2016 Paralympic Games. I'm an ambassador for a variety of stroke charities. And yeah, I'm loving life.
I read that you was 27 when you had your stroke?
Yep, so I was 27 years old when I had my stroke, yeah.
Were you a cyclist before you had the stroke?
Before I had my stroke, I cycled for leisure. So I had a mountain bike and it was literally just to get me from A to B pretty much. But other than that, I never cycled. It was only because of my stroke that I found cycling as an actual passion.
Ah, okay. So that's interesting. So when you actually had your stroke on the day, do you sort of remember what happened?
Yeah. So mine was a hemorrhagic stroke, but I obviously didn't know that at the time. So I was having headaches for quite a long time and having some severe neck pain. I didn't think anything of it. And I was at work at the computer desk and I fainted. And not long after having a phone call saying that my nan had passed away from multiple strokes, which was a bit weird. Oh, okay. But I assumed it was just like a stress related, like maybe like or almost like a panic reaction maybe to hearing that and didn't think anything more of it. I then again fainted a couple of days later at work and fell down the stairs. And then when I was at home, I woke up with like a bloodshot eye. So my left eye was completely bloodshot and I'd kind of fallen against the wall and thought maybe I'd just knocked my head maybe. But the headaches were getting worse. And it was only because I was told, you've got to look after yourself. You need to go and get yourself checked out. But I waited for a day off to go to the hospital and check that everything was okay. So it wasn't like I was zoomed into hospital knowing that there was something wrong or I had stroke. Mine was very much I had little telltale signs, which could have been that I assumed were migraines, to be fair. And I went into Warwickshire A&E at the time. And it was there that I got diagnosed effectively.
Wow.
And it was a long process. It wasn't straight away either. It wasn't like they saw me and thought, oh, yeah, you're having a stroke. It was a process of about 4 days, over a process of 4 days. So I went through the rigmarole of A&E and I went in. And to be fair, I genuinely thought I was going to be sent away with headaches. And I very nearly did get sent away with cluster headaches. And I was sitting in A&E. And I saw children with bloody noses and broken bones and other people that were being violently sick. So, and I thought, there's nothing really wrong with me. It is literally just a headache. And I got taken through to triage and I was all the usuals that you get when you go into A&E. And a doctor saw me and said, look, I think it's cluster headaches. They went over my signs and symptoms and the pain out of 10. They said, I think it's cluster headaches, but I'm just going to do a CT scan just to make sure. So they put me into this massive tunnel. And I went in there and actually it didn't pick up anything. So they were still going to send me away with headaches. And it was just because a neurologist came by and went through the signs and symptoms and said, look, I want you to look into this a bit more because something's not quite making sense, really, I suppose. 27 years old, headaches, bloodshot eyes, stiff neck. Something's not quite right. Let's just be doubly sure. And I did a dyed CT scan. So I went back into the CT machine. And then I had a lumbar puncture. So they put a nice big massive needle into my spine.
Wow.
To basically see if there's any blood in the spinal column. And it was only then that I found out that I was having a stroke. So I had 4 days in hospital as well as all the days leading up to going into A&E, waiting for a day off. So effectively I was a ticking time bomb waiting to go off and my head could have blown. I say blown up. That's not really a nice way of thinking about it. Really. I suppose it's just my way. I just joke about things, but effectively, at any point I could have been a goner. So I was really very fortunate.
And then so that sounds, it's almost kind of like different to what you hear about people having strokes. like when you hear about a typical stroke, that you see someone with the symptoms and then they get rushed in and they know what's happening. So that was sort of a slow build up over, was it a couple of weeks, a couple of days, did you say?
Quite easily. They do believe that I could have well been this could have been brewing over a period of time, but it hadn't burst. So because I had an aneurysm effectively in my brain, a subacute brain hemorrhage I had, so it was a hemorrhagic stroke, and that burst and started to leak. So that was happening, I reckon, for a couple of weeks, and the pressure was just gradually building. But before that, the aneurysm would have been there for quite a long time, because I have a very unique cluster of blood vessels in my head. So I think obviously it just kind of, the pressure built and built and built.
And so apart from the headaches and the neck ache and everything like that, did you have any other symptoms, or was it just that?
No, so it was literally just that. And I had always suffered with headaches. My mum says that when I was a child, I always complained of headaches. And she just thought I was just a bit of a hypochondriac, I guess. I don't know, a bit of a moaner, maybe moaning Myrtle. But I'm assuming that they were potentially all linked. Like, I have severe headaches now, but I think a lot of those headaches are very much linked to my operation, and obviously the injury and the damage that's been caused to my brain. Yeah. So it's very much, it is what it is.
And the kind of the treatment when you were in hospital, obviously you had to have brain surgery, I'm guessing,
So I entered Warwickshire A&E, where I got diagnosed, and I was given two options. I was either offered, because I didn't have a neurosurgeon on site, I was offered to either fly to Cambridge, where they had a neurosurgeon, or jet it down the motorway, Blues and Twos, to Birmingham Queen Elizabeth. So I chose Birmingham Queen Elizabeth because it's a bit closer, but also because I didn't really want to go in a helicopter without seeing the views. I didn't really want to remember a helicopter ride being something so depressing. I'd rather just crack on. So I went to Birmingham Queen Elizabeth, where while I was there, I met the surgeon that was going to be doing the operation, and they drew this lovely picture of what my aneurysm looked like and effectively what they were going to do. So they drew this picture, and I was gobsmacked to see that I had a flaccid willy in my head. That's the picture they drew. It was a flaccid willy, and I was very gobsmacked by that picture. And that's the one of the key memories and takeaways that I have from prior. And anyway, so they told me what they were going to do, and they basically were going to go in coil. So they go up through the groin, they bypass the heart, and they go up to the site of the bleed, and they release these tiny little springs, almost like, I call them worms. They're not alive. They don't move in your head. They're just little springs that seal the hole shut to allow the blood flow to kind of come back to normal and create. But they actually woke me up during the operation, and it failed because I didn't have an extra kin there. And I had to sign this piece of documentation just to say that they could basically open me up with a knife and fork and staple me shut. So they went in and they cut me open from my forehead down to my left ear. Left, just having to think about it, reverse it around. And they basically, it's a bit of a face-off incident. So they peeled me back and they cut me open and they stapled me shut. And I've got 3 titanium clips now. So I've got 2 curved clips and 1 flat. And that is what kind of, it holds it shut and allows the blood flow to return to normal. And then
after the operation, what kind of was the treatment like after that? Was it, I'm guessing there was a lot of recovery needed after kind of such a major operation?
Yeah, do you know what? When I was told that I was having a hemorrhagic stroke, a subacute brain hemorrhage, I was kind of in denial, I suppose, because I joked about it. I was like, I'll be moving in about 3-4 days. Literally, I just need a few days rest after and I'll be fine. I really was not aware of the secondary effects of a stroke and how significant they are and life-changing they are. So when I woke up in ICU. So at the time, I couldn't breathe for myself, and I had an armoured pipe in. And they'd left that in because apparently my lungs kept collapsing and they weren't working for themselves. So they had to keep it in for a little longer than usual, than they hoped. So while I was in ICU for about 3 weeks, and I was aware of everyone around me, but I was drifting in and out of sleep. And I think sleep is a crucial thing. And they always say rest and recovery. It's all about sleeping and drinking loads. Obviously, I couldn't drink. I couldn't hydrate myself. So I had loads. I was tubed up to the eyeballs. I had loads of tubes coming out of me, and I was being fed through tubes. But I could hear everyone around me, and I remember hearing the doctor say something about not knowing whether I'd lost any movement physically, but they weren't sure about my speech, because they said the area of the brain they cut into, I may lose my speech or have problems speaking. As you can tell, I can speak. And I made it a massive point. But I remember thinking to myself, I want to pull the pipe out and prove I can speak. And I had the pipe removed about a week and a half later after the operation. And in that time, I then was able to try and speak, and I couldn't really speak. It was kind of more a gurgle. And I suppose a lot of it was muscle wastage and having something in your throat that's not naturally there. Your muscles aren't used to opening and closing. It also damaged a little bit of my airway. So I had to work out what was wrong with me, what I needed to work with. And I was in a lot of denial. I'm very much like a child. I'd almost reverted back to being a child in how I dealt with things. So I was very jokey, and I would say to the doctors that I'd been to the toilet when I hadn't. And I think that at the time, I remember saying that, but I know I couldn't have. I think at the time I genuinely felt I had. I had a catheter fitted, and I had lost, basically the whole of my right side was lost. So I couldn't use my hand, I couldn't use my foot, couldn't use any of that side. I couldn't sit up properly. I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't swallow properly. I couldn't eat. My balance and coordination was completely off, because obviously I had a dead weight on one side. I was unaware of that side completely. I wasn't even aware of it. So I wasn't aware that my right hand was there. So a lot of the time I would end up with a dislocated shoulder, because I'd got it stuck behind my back and tried turning or something onto it and twisted it out of the socket. So they were the main areas, but I realised straight away, and as I was developing. So I was 3 weeks in ICU, and then I went on to a stroke ward. And I only lasted a week there before they had enough of me, effectively, because I kept trying to get out my bed. So they gave me a one arm drive wheelchair, so that I could still steer myself with one arm. So I used my left arm to try and get everywhere. I was very slow at this rate. A bit of a snail, and I would purposely try and get out of my bed and try and walk. And I remember locking myself in the shower room with a towel, so the nurses couldn't get in to try and shave my legs. And I came out like a bloodbath, because I couldn't feel, I didn't know where I was pressing. I literally hacked my leg away, and there was just blood everywhere. And I couldn't feel it, so I was fine. But for the nurses, it was more the paperwork for them. I think looking back on it, I was like, oh my God, I must have been a right handful. But I still wouldn't change how I dealt with things. I needed that for my sanity and to prove, I think it was that drive that actually got me to where I am now. And then from the stroke ward, I ended up in intensive rehab, and I was there for a month. So effectively, I was in hospital for 2 months before I self-discharged against doctors' decisions. I felt that I was being held back, and they weren't holding me back on purpose. They were stretched thin with their what they could provide for me, and I wanted to be moving faster. I knew that it was the early stages that were the most critical in getting movement back, and I wanted the movement in my hand back, and they weren't focusing on my hand. They wanted to focus on getting me up and mobile, so the leg was the priority. I didn't necessarily get on with one of my physiotherapists, so I felt like I was being held back there, and I didn't agree with the assessment process. But that was me as a patient, how I felt, and I was the youngest one there, so I wanted to survive, and I wanted to be the best, and I was one of the fastest improving patients because I was the youngest there, I guess. So I self-discharged, but it was then that I realised how much effect it had on me. It was huge, but it was a process that took time and acceptance to come to.
I was going to say, 2027, you must have been the youngest by quite some way, maybe on the stroke ward. Normally, you hear, and it's more older people. I guess that definitely probably had an effect on you wanting to, you're young, you wanted to, used to being out and being active, and then suddenly stuck in the ward. That doesn't sound great. So then when you left you said you self-discharged. You went home, I'm guessing, from that in the wheelchair, or were you up and able to move at this point?
I was in a wheelchair. So I self-discharged on a bank holiday. So they didn't actually have the staff or the outreach team available to even help me in the home. But I did not want to stay in hospital any longer. Yeah. So I went home, and there is where I literally broke down, because I suddenly realised all the things I couldn't do. The things you take for granted. So you know how you say, I just want to go back actually. You're saying about how you normally see it as older people. Generally, before I had my stroke, I generally thought it was older people like my nan. My nan was in her 90s, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s when she suffered hers. But it's amazing, because I didn't realise until after my stroke, when I started looking into it and starting to seek help and see people that were similar to myself, so they could relate and empathise and not feel alone, I think, in those really lonely stages of life. I realised actually how many people it does affect. And, you can have a stroke in the womb.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So as young as newborn, you can have a stroke. It's not very often spoken about, and it's not necessarily always noticed, because we do instantly think it is the older generation, but it isn't. So going back again to going home. So I went home, and the very first day I remember sitting in the corner, literally rocking and crying my eyes out like a baby, like going back to being a child, hearing your parents shouting and not wanting to hear it. And I was just rocking. And I remember thinking to myself, well done, how I made the right decision. And I had no support around me. I was lost. I didn't really know what to do. You take for granted little things like tying your shoelace, opening a tin of beans, cutting some vegetables, or even buttering bread. That even now, buttering bread is really hard for me. Like, I can do it. I have function in my right hand, but it's slower. So when I butter bread, I normally put a hole in it, which is so frustrating. No one wants a holey piece of bread.
And then,
sorry.
And then I was just going to say, so you were at home, and then did you have access to physios kind of outside coming in, or did you how did you kind of go from their self kind of discharging back to getting on the bike? Because I think I read online that it was you decided to get on a bike to try and get to speed up your recovery process. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I found a mountain bike in an old barn. So at the time when I was self-discharged, I lived in like a barn house with I had a partner at the time, not with her now, and she had 2 children. And it was a really hard situation, because it was a new relationship and it wasn't right. It's not how you go about a relationship. You don't get into a relationship and then carry on. It doesn't work. And I found it very hard to adjust to life. And I tried very hard, and I used cycling to try and do that. But I was in the middle of nowhere, and it broke down. So I had to move. I was going to move, and because the relationship was down, I couldn't cope anymore, as well as my life. And I was diagnosed with epilepsy about 6 months after the stroke. And suddenly I was like, I don't know what to do. I need to get out of here. I need to find myself again. And we had this bike. I had this bike in the barn, and I found a bike, and I got on this bike, but to ride, I didn't really have very good balance. So I tied my foot to the pedal, and I tied my hand to the handlebar because my hand wouldn't grip. And it was very, the word they use is flaccid. It just kind of hung around. So I tied it there so it had nowhere to go. And I pedaled. I got on a bike, and it was survival mode. I couldn't cope with life, and I needed to get out. And that was my only option. I couldn't drive. I had lost my driving license, and I needed out, but there was nowhere to go. So I rang a friend, and I said, look, can I come and see you for a few days? And she said, yeah, come down. And I tied my foot to, like I said, I tied my foot to the pedal, and I tied my hand to the handlebar, and I worked out about 120 miles. And the only way I got there was through memory of knowing road numbers. So I used road numbers because I couldn't read a map. I used road numbers, and I cycled all the way to Cambridgeshire and to Cambridge from Warwickshire.
That's incredible.
And I have no idea how I did it. So I set up about 10 in the morning and I arrived there about 1, 2 in the morning, possibly 3 in the morning. And so it took forever, or felt like forever. And when I got there, my whole body shut down. I couldn't use my right side at all. And I lay on her sofa wallowing in self-pity. And I think that was the abysmal pit of despair. I was stuck in this huge rut. I was far from having my own place. I'd lost my animals, so I had dogs, and all of them had to be rehomed. So I had no one to rely on. You know, the dogs were my life. They were my saviour. They were the thing that kept me going, I think, really. They were the one constant in my life. But I couldn't have them because I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. So it wasn't fair on them. So they had to be rehomed. And they spent 2 months in kennels while I was in hospital, you see, and that wasn't fair on them either. So I had to make that decision. And they were my therapy as well, really. So, yeah, I got to my friends and I stayed there for about 3 weeks or so. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do? And there was a part of me that probably wished I was dead. I didn't, you know, I was a shadow of myself. I didn't have anything to live for, really. So when I was speaking to my friend, her mum came over one day and she said to me, she said, look, do you want to go for a drink? And she took me out and I think we had a hot chocolate or something. And she kind of talked to me. She just gave me a talking to. And it was a kick up the backside I needed, really. She wasn't telling me off or anything. She was actually just trying to motivate me and make me see that I was worth something. I said, look, let me give you a mission. She goes, I want you to find a sport and be the best you can be at it. And that could be whatever that looks like. But you've always been sporty. Don't let other people tell you can't do something, because I think I must have been there in this very pessimistic mood, this very dismissive mood. I can't do anything now, you know, and I was always sporty and now I can't do it. And the thing is, the reason it kind of gave me the kick up the backside I needed was because she had terminal cancer.
Okay.
And for someone to know that she hasn't got long to live, but still be able to talk to me and give me a time of day and want to make me realise that I have a second chance at life, must have taken a lot for her, because she knew that she didn't have long to live, but yet all I saw was the happy moments. And I know behind the closed door she must have been struggling and it must have been hard, but a lot of the time all I saw was the love she had to give to her family and her daughter and her son, and going to visit her friends, still travelling. So she was making the most of the time she had left. And it suddenly made me realise that actually, what am I doing? I have a chance to live life. It's going to be different, but I've got to try. So I looked at sports and I tried sort of athletics. And that was awful. I tried wheelchair racing and I was so slow. I had 8-year-olds passing me and I was going around this tiny little circle and I couldn't move. It was rubbish. Then I tried running on crutches. So I used crutches, but my arm the crutch would kind of fall and I would kiss tarmac. Tarmac was my favourite place, clearly. So we scrapped that. And then I realised, why don't I try cycling? So I reached out and cycling, obviously, I won the first gold medal of the Rio 2016 Paralympic Games. So clearly I made it. But it was the process. It was the process, really, but it was the biggest thing, because actually, first of all, I needed to have a place, because I was staying on my friend's couch and that wasn't any good. And I needed to be where my hospital appointments were, because it was really important. So all of a sudden I had to ask for help. I had to seek help. So I had to go to the council and I had to reach out, and I ended up in emergency accommodation in a hotel, and I was living in a hotel that wasn't friendly, disability friendly. And then I got accommodation and I got my own little flat, which was really nice, actually, because it suddenly gave me a little bit of independence and a bit of I'm getting somewhere now. But I didn't have any furniture. I didn't have any money coming in. I was literally living on nothing, and I wasn't eating, so that wasn't helping my recovery. And I was sleeping on my kitchen countertop. And obviously my OT had seen this and she'd given me some little bits. And my occupational therapist, this is my OT that came out, and my physiotherapist used to come out. They saw obviously these little bits and they gave me some support lines. And I reached out to a charity, because at the time I had a house in Stratford upon Avon, and a charity called Citizen Advice Bureau. And it was pretty hard for me to ask for help. And I didn't want to ask for help. So I didn't ring them. But it just so happened these two women knocked on my door, and they literally made themselves at home. They came in, they realised that everything was going on. They literally just made themselves at home. And I'm actually really good friends with them now, Marilyn and Eve. And it's really lovely. And if it wasn't for their help, I don't think I would have got out of the rut I got into. In those moments, I needed someone and something, and I didn't have anyone. And I needed help, but I didn't want to ask for it. I was too proud.
I think that's probably, I think a lot of people could relate to that. You know, you've been active your entire life, and then kind of this massive thing happens that's completely unexpected, because you walk into the hospital. It's not as if you're rushed in you know, in an ambulance type thing. You just self-present at A&E, and then it all just comes from there. So wow, massive, props to you for kind of, you know, the process of then reaching out to people. And then, other than Citizens Advice, did you reach out to any other charities at that point, kind of stroke specific charities?
So the Citizens Advice Bureau actually gave me contact numbers for the Stroke Association, because I'd never considered looking at a charity and asking for help. So they helped me fill out a form for a Life After Stroke grant, but that was more specifically to help with my cycling, really, because I pitched my story and what had happened, but then I also told them what I was trying to do and achieve, and they gave me a small grant to help me fund some of the equipment I needed. So I needed rollers and I needed a turbo so that I could train at home, because I couldn't ride on the road yet. I wasn't safe enough. And then I got a bike through British Cycling, because I saw the talent that I had. I didn't see the talent. I had no idea that I could actually achieve what I achieved. I wasn't even going there to get a gold medal. I was just using cycling to save my life, to make me more physically active and help my mental well-being, really. So I went to the Stroke Association, and then Citizens Advice Bureau also found different strokes. Now, I say different. How was that found, actually? Actually, I don't know whether I actually found that through Citizens Advice Bureau, or whether I found that through someone coming to me in the hospital and approaching me potentially, because somehow I magically found different strokes as well. But I do a lot of work now with both those charities, as well as a charity called A Stroke of Luck. And each of them have their own kind of focus, but they all work with stroke survivors and the support network around them as well, because it's not just the survivor that it affects, it supports the whole network, the family around them. So, because if they become the carer, then all of a sudden life can crumble, you know, and you're losing your independence, and what kind of relationship is it? So life, it's a massive ripple effect. And
you said so do you meet, how is it like kind of meeting other stroke survivors now, in terms of using kind of your own experiences? Do you help them kind of come to terms with what's happened to them, the stroke, and then give them kind of advice for the future? Is that something you're doing now?
Yes. So I do. So I do quite a lot of, like I said, I would do a lot of work for the charities. I'm ambassadors and patrons for them, and I've done a variety of different events, talking at events and telling them my story, but more so looking really at the parts of life that I struggle with and how I overcame it, and the feelings and the emotions I went through, because every stroke survivor and their family member will have experienced something very different, and it'll be personal to them, but there'll be something within my story that they will relate to and they can empathize with, and it might give them a little bit of hope. And, you know, for me, it's about captivating, educating and motivating, because if I can get out the other side and find something, then so can everyone else. Yes, everyone will recover to a different level. You know, like I use a wheelchair and I have crutches, but I don't use them all the time. And because I can walk, I try to do that as much as I can. But I do struggle. And I'm actually just going back into coaching, which is really hard for me, because I've got to learn to juggle my fatigue levels, as well as and I'm also trying to find work. So that's a new area for me. So I've done 8 years as a as a cyclist, effectively, as an athlete, which is a very different world because it's focused on what I can do. Whereas when you start applying for jobs, all of a sudden your disabilities become very heightened, they become very noticeable, and you become very unemployable or very unattractive to an employer. And it's really hard to get across that, yes, I have these skills because I worked before I had my stroke. I have skills, I have transferable skills, and I have, I've reached a massive level in sport, but I can't even get into the simplest job in a sports industry now. And although they say that it's non-discriminatory and it's equal opportunities, I don't even get an interview most of the time. And it is very hard to accept that actually I now have to accept my disabilities in a very different way, because suddenly they're things that cause a restriction on my job. So I can't drive. So a lot of jobs that I go for, they want a driving license, but I know that I can do that job. 110% I can do that job. Yes, I've got to adapt slightly around my fatigue levels, but if the employer can become accommodating and realize that and actually go, you know what, because I can ride and I can ride, so I could ride to these destinations dependent. There's some jobs that I really couldn't, but I know that I could do it, but I won't be given a chance because actually there's someone else that can. And there is a hidden discrimination there. Indirect discrimination, but I think everyone does it, they do it. And I think that's a massive area as well now that I'm just coming through and learning about and actually realizing. So it's making me want to grab the bull by the horns and actually fight it and make and speak up about it and make other people realize, because you don't realize the difficulties until you're in it. And I didn't, I was blind to it. So that's something that I'm really working on at the moment. And I'm just about to start doing, I say blogging, I'm setting up my own, I've got social media accounts, but I'm actually setting up my own account specifically for advice and guidance, and to start kind of like trying to change people's lives in a different way. So, not that it keeps sharing personal stories, but when I found the stroke charities, it was actually quite relieving because suddenly people understood in a completely different way that I never realized. And they're empathic in a way, but wasn't sympathetic as well. It wasn't sympathy, it was empathic. They related because they had been through it. So they understood what I had been through. They understood. And I think that was the difference. There was an understanding that was, because when you're able-bodied, and I say able-bodied lightly, that's a term we use quite a lot in sport, and before my stroke, I wouldn't have been able to understand it fully. I worked in care for a while, and we had stroke survivors there. And you do not understand the hidden struggles and the effects until you've lived it. I can go and support someone that's autistic, but I don't know fully. I can't fully relate to them because I haven't lived it. However, I do have a son that's got autism. It's his mild autism, so it has given me a much more, and I say as my son's 19 now, so he's not biologically mine, but he's still my son. And I've had to learn to adapt to his needs and understand him, as well as teach him how to navigate life as well. So that's given me an understanding of life in a different way. So you can say that you understand someone, but until you've lived something, you don't fully get it, if that makes sense.
But go back to the cycling, because I did want to touch on the fact, gold medal winning at the Rio Paralympics. So it was not actually that long after you kind of started, cycling for GB till Rio happened, was it? It was
about really 18 months.
It
was about 18 months.
And that's a really, really quick kind of turnaround from, you're saying you tied your foot onto the pedal and your hand onto the handlebar, and then going from that to obviously cycling on the track. Do you think kind of cycling speeded up your recovery process? Kind of that intensive training. I'm guessing there would have been coaches around kind of that setup that helped you, physios as well. But would you say, without cycling, it definitely seems to have speeded everything up, would you say?
Definitely. I think though, first of all, it's about your thought processes and how you channel yourself, because if you have a negative thought process, you're not going to achieve anything. You have to change your outlook on life, and it's really hard to do. I'm not saying it's easy, because I had to change it. I went through that pit of despair and wallowing in self-pity and had to change it. But I was always a positive person beforehand, which probably was helpful because it meant that I could draw on that. Plus I had done counselling courses, so I was almost very open to my faults or flaws in my character, so I could really work on that and draw on the tools. So it's almost like my own toolbox of survival. But with the cycling, physically, it most definitely did, but it also saved me mentally because it gave me a purpose in life. I think when you lose such a big part of you, because I lost a lot of my memory as well, I had to rework out who I was. So I had, and that takes time to create a new you. So for me, I call myself Megan the Second. So before my stroke, I was Megan the First. And after my stroke, I'm Megan the Second. And actually, if you think about life, you actually you're constantly evolving as a person. Life experiences change you, and you change all the time as you grow older. And I think for me, it was a massive turning point, and it gave me a chance. Almost, I changed what was a huge negative into a positive. So before my stroke, I was a bit of a jack of all trades. I did loads of different careers. So I was a sports coach, I was a lifeguard, I was a swimming instructor, I was a duty manager, I was an operations manager, I was a police officer, started as a special constable, then went on to that, and then I was a care assistant, then I was a senior care worker, then I was an activities coordinator, and I was a SSCO in schools. So I did loads of different jobs. So I never really stuck at one job, and I'm very good at spreading myself very thin even now, so I have to be very focused. But by using cycling, it kind of gave me a purpose, and it was one thing that I was good at, and it focused me. And if it wasn't for cycling, I don't know where I'd be now, to be fair. It kind of saved me. But I wasn't a natural winner. I wasn't someone that liked winning. I didn't like going on podium and receiving medals either. I really struggled with that. So to cope with that, I actually dedicated my rise to other stroke survivors and people that had lost their life as well to stroke, for the family around them. Because for me, what I was doing, I was on a platform where I could raise awareness. And when you go to Paralympic Games, it's this huge bubble where it's all about what you can do. But the people watching in, you're inspiring that next generation, and you'll have survivors there that have lost limbs or lost the ability to use a limb. Have, some people it's congenital, so they're born with their disabilities. Others, they acquire them, so they have to relearn things. And it's giving them hope, effectively. And that is what I got a lot out of that for myself as well. And I suppose that's kind of selfish, because what I was doing, I was using other people in order to help me achieve by ignoring, by kind of hiding the bits that I couldn't cope with. So the limelight and the, being on the top, top of the podium. But it was giving other people hope. So like for my gold medal that I won, I actually dedicated it to a young lad called Alistair Rowan. And he had a brain hemorrhage very similar to me, literally a couple of months before the Rio Games. And I found his mum through the Different Strokes site, because they had like a little chat site. And I I messaged her directly, and I said, look, this is what I'm doing. Could I would it be okay if I dedicate my ride to Alistair? Because I think his story is amazing, and it's not too dissimilar to mine, I guess. But because he was 10 as well, and I wanted to give them hope, because imagine parents, it happening to their child. It's their child that it's happening to, and they must feel so helpless sometimes, or not know what the outcomes are going to look like. I still have communication with them now. It's very limited, because I'm rubbish with social media, absolutely rubbish with social media. But I do have communication, and I keep an eye on what Alice is up to. And he does a lot of talks in his school, and he now does bits like that. And it's amazing to see his progression, even with his own little disabilities that he has to struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And I think everyone has a talent. Let's tap into those talents. And it's giving them a chance, an opportunity to try new things. And I'm not saying that every stroke survivor or every survivor of anything has to be a cyclist and be the best they can be and a gold medalist. For some people, it might just be reaching a social level in a club. You know, it could be that they want to learn to write again, or they want to be, you know, become a poet and, you know, express their feelings through words. It might be that they want to find art and they pick up a paintbrush for the first time because they've never thought about it beforehand. And actually, I think everyone has an opportunity. It's just accessing that and trying things, giving things a go.
Yeah, definitely. And I've just got a few more questions. Then one of the things I wanted to ask is, what do you think was the first thing? Can you remember the first thing you thought, I've achieved this after you had your stroke? Was there anything that kind of stands out?
For me, it was a process that I didn't really accept fully. Okay. I suppose I was in a lot of denial. I just kind of carried on through life and I focused myself on other people to stop me thinking about me. I think when I really achieved, I suppose it was after my gold medal, but not straight away. So in December 2016, I was invited to the Spotty Awards. So it's the Sports Personality of the Year was. And that's something I would never have considered going to. And I was actually on the front row and I had Robbie Williams singing. And now I don't actually like Robbie Williams as a singer necessarily. Don't get me wrong. He's probably a lovely guy. Not spoken to him personally. His music's okay, but it's not my kind of music. But the fact that I was there and I think it was just there was suddenly this massive dawning that I had achieved it because also I had never been able to hold down a relationship after my stroke. And after Rio, I met my wife-to-be, who's my fiance. She proposed to me a couple of years ago. I am yet to get her an engagement ring and she will not let me live that down until I do get it, and I will get it. I am just very bad at organising myself. So I blame the stroke completely. But I now have a family. I have my wife-to-be. I have my stepson, effectively, Harry, who's 19. I also have my nephew who now lives with us full-time. We got custody of him a year ago. He's 6 years old. He now lives in our full custody. And I have dogs. I have dogs again. And I think actually having a dog, you know what? Having a dog, when I got a dog, I realised I was back on the up because it was about, when was it? It was a year before I was meant to go to Rio. And my coach said I shouldn't get any ties. I should focus solely on riding my bike. And I remember thinking, I can't. I need a dog. And I found this little Jack Russell. And I called him Medlar. He was about 6 months old. And I managed to get him for about 100 quid. He was, they kept the litter foolishly and they couldn't cope with all the Jack Russells, I don't think. So I bought this little dog and rescued him from this manic home. And he needed help just as much as I needed help. And I think that is when I realised I was back on the up because it gave me a focus.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love him to bits. You know, dogs are my therapy. So although I use cycling as a focus, animals, I will always fall back on animals as my next therapy. Definitely. You know, if I have any struggles, if I'm struggling at home or my OCD rears its ugly head because I've got OCD, which can really spiral when things aren't going right or when I'm struggling with my health. Then walking the dogs or trying to walk the dogs, staggering with the dogs, is my saviour, really.
Oh wow, yeah. That's really nice. That's amazing. Kind of getting back to that family life with the dogs. That's really nice. And then just finally, what's your kind of plans for the future? What's next for you?
So, because obviously I've been struggling to get employment because I'm disabled, the joys. Many people will probably relate. You feel very much discriminated, although it's never shown or it's never spoken about. You do feel discriminated against. I am now in the process of setting up my own cycling company. But within my company, I'm going to train up my own group of cyclists. But every employee that I have will have disabilities that they are working with, whether that be learning disabilities or physical impairments. But effectively, I want it to be a completely inclusive environment that anyone can enter. And within that, the aim would be to deliver cycling to as many children as possible Looking obviously at children with special education, every child, it doesn't matter who they are, it's inclusive, but obviously there is a key focus on children in care because of my nephew, having brought him into my life and having that as quite key in my heart, but also special educational needs, children with learning disabilities, because cycling can be so therapeutic, and it's not just that you can race and win a medal, but it can be very social, it can be physically impactful, it can be great for mental health, and for me it's massive. It's a massive part of my life now, my story. So why not use what I'm good at to help others? And that's what I'm doing. And then alongside that, I'm then obviously creating this social media channel where I'm going to have almost like I haven't decided on a name yet, so no one bother asking me. You can find me on social media anyway, and eventually you'll find out what it is. I'm still working out myself. I hate social media, but at the same time, it's amazing to link with amazing people. I am rubbish with it, so I'm trying to learn it all now at the moment, really. But I'll eventually have my social media platform where I it's almost like a Megan chat platform, and get advice and guidance and support network almost. So I'm working on that as well behind the lines, as well as writing a book. So that's happening as well. So I've got lots going on. It's just I'm back to the jack of all trades, really, aren't I? I've just realised.
That sounds amazing. Lots to do, which is very, very incredible. Lots of things to do. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Actually, it's been a really great insight actually into your life, what you've been through, and just hoping if people kind of relate to anything that you've said today, kind of inspire them to keep going, which is amazing. So thank you very much.
Definitely. I think one thing, can I just say one thing? I live by saying I'm not what happened to me, I'm what I choose to become. And the reason I live by that is because life is full of choices, and sometimes you make the utterly worst choice in the world and it goes horribly wrong. And then other times you make the best choice and suddenly everything is working perfectly and running smoothly. And I think, part of my journey was learning to accept that, I'm not perfect, and life is this is my life, this is my journey, and I'm not always going to get it right. And I think if that's something I would give to people to take away, is that life is full of choices, but you've got to accept who you are and work with it. I think that's key.